Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar, DevSecOps Deploy Secure Cloud-Native Applications Fast. Today's session is brought to you in partnership between Aqua Security and CodeFresh, during which we'll offer a perspective on how each solution helps organizations evolve their development practices by automating manual processes to deliver applications to market more quickly. Specifically, we'll be focusing on automating application in your DevOps pipeline, helping you to build software quickly, using custom job orchestration, and securing your apps by embedding comprehensive security testing and policy-driven controls early on. Our presenters today are Dan Garfield, Chief Technology Evangelist at CodeFresh, and Raj Seshadri, Senior Solutions Architect at Aqua. We'd like to make this an interactive session, and we'll be taking questions throughout the session. So please remember to enter them into the questions panel as they come to mind. Also, be sure to download the materials that have been made available in the handouts section for reference and for sharing with your team after the webinar. This session is being recorded, and a link to the recording will be sent to you shortly after the webinar concludes. So that's it for housekeeping items. Raj, the floor is all yours.
All right. Thank you, David. I appreciate the intro here. All right. Good afternoon, guys. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, wherever you guys are located. This is Raj Seshadri from Aqua Security, and we also have Dan from CodeFresh as well. Dan, do you want to say a few words before we get started?
Yeah, this is actually a really cool demo and presentation that Raj has put together, and it's one that we've actually done in a few different workshops, and we've had really great feedback on, and just excited to share that with you because I think that there's a really big missing link between security and continuous integration today, and it's actually one of the things that we're going to talk about.
Absolutely. Thanks, Dan. Yeah, we also want to make this very interactive. We definitely want to make this very interactive. And with that, I'll get started here. So when you guys are developing your cloud-native apps, you see the dramatic shift in all things, right? Speed, scale, and networking. And this diagram says it all. The dev cycle, the scale of number of containers per host per hour per day is in the thousands. The continuous deployment that you guys have to do on a daily basis to make your applications more agile and more so your business actually more agile in the process. You have to do the CI/CD releases constantly, right? There are, compared to the VM world, to the container world, you have few nodes, few apps in the VM world, and then in the container world, you have thousands of interconnected microservices. So all of this constitutes a bigger attack surface for all the folks that are out there who are trying to breach your application, right? So if you look at the threat landscape, it's huge, starting from untrusted image on your CI/CD and registry process, which is kind of where we are going to focus our main topic. But Aqua Security adds a lot of addresses this whole threat landscape in an entire ecosystem. You know, from orchestration layer breach to malicious behavior. Network attacks are quite common these days in the container space. Resource abuse as well. And then last but not least, access violations. So, but we'll focus mostly on the CI/CD part of things, and we'll drill more into the details when we go into the demo and sorts. So, where does security fit in, right? So this is kind of a comparison of before containers and after containers. So if you look in this diagram here, in the before containers, we had to provision servers, configure software, access risk, all of those things are gone. That whole section in blue is pretty much gone, whereas with containers, you basically do the static code analysis, get the base set up, and then you build the image, assess the risk, and deploy. So that's kind of where we see security fits, and it's a lot more continuous, with the CI/CD processes. So, Aqua Security, what is our approach, right? We think the security is a shared responsibility. We kind of shift left and issues early and fast, and that's exactly what we're going to be accomplishing with CodeFresh and Aqua here, and you guys will see that. And we protect the workloads with focus on prevention. We whitelist the good behavior, prevent anomalies, and address all of these things while the image is being built, and also while it is being sent to your registry, and last but not least, when it's it goes into your runtime environment. Okay, and then the whole concept around Aqua is secure once run anywhere. We are cloud agnostic, OS agnostic as well.
Yeah, just to note on this, most of the vulnerabilities that I've seen that have led to companies losing PII or having their systems hacked, it's usually related to known vulnerabilities that are from shared libraries or from software that is very publicly used. And usually it's well after there's already been a patch released. And when you have a sort of separate security org whose job it is to try to chase that stuff down, it leads to this really disjointed feeling that they've got it. The security's in charge of it, they're going to take care of it. But really, developers need to have that information front and center so that anytime they're working, if there's a security vulnerability, they become aware of it immediately so that they can actually take care of it immediately. Because that prevention, that is the #1 way that we do stop hacks from occurring. It's really by having that system in place where you're integrating security fixes immediately while you're working in the application, not as some sort of 0-day response.
Absolutely, Dan. Well said. This kind of all summarizes into prevention is better than cure. So you kind of shift left and fix all the issues fast and early. That makes it a lot more meaningful. All right, so the container lifecycle. So if you look in this classic diagram, right, when you're building your cloud native application, you got 3 distinct phases: the build phase, the ship phase, and the run phase. So if you look, if you focus on the build phase, to the left of the build process, you got a lot of vulnerabilities that are trying to come into this pipeline, right? You got unapproved base images, malware, hard-coded secrets, known CVEs, like Dan mentioned. So CodeFresh integration with Aqua right here in the build process is so critical, because we can scan for vulnerabilities, malware, OSS secrets, all of those, and compare that to the base policy configuration that you guys set. And it's a simple JSON file. And CodeFresh, during the build process, checks with Aqua and says, hey, Aqua, does this make sense? Or does this image has got any vulnerabilities or secrets or whatnot? Aqua says yes or no, and depending on whether it finds a vulnerability, CodeFresh will pass or fail the build process accordingly. So this integration is so crucial. Also saves a lot of time in the DevSecOps world, because typically a developer usually develops the code and ships it to the registry, and then the security folks, when they get involved in the runtime of things, they look at it and say, this is not going to run in my Kubernetes environment because it's got a lot of vulnerabilities. You guys have to go ahead and fix it. But if the power is in the hands of the developer right up front, this makes a lot of sense. Okay, so this diagram says it all, and we'll be doing the demo more in depth on that. Okay, same with regards to shift left, baked in versus bolt-on security, right? So every step of the process, from the build, ship, and run, Aqua integrates with its Cyber Intelligence Center, which is our vulnerability database. And if there is any vulnerability that is found, we check the unique digest of the image. We do continuous scans for CVEs, CVE blacklist, whitelist, risk scores, and whatnot. And if there is any issue, we open up a JIRA ticket, and it's just that whole continuous process with build, ship, and run along with CodeFresh, and this makes a lot of sense. Okay. This is the overall architecture diagram when it comes to Aqua, how our architecture is built, and this is kind of double-clicking more into the details on the build, ship, run process. So in the CI/CD process, you see CodeFresh there integrating with Aqua on the image scanning side of things, which talks to our Cyber Intelligence Center as well. We also continuously scan once the code is pushed into a registry, whether it's Docker registry, JFrog, or Quay, whatever it is. We continuously scan the registry also. We also support function as a service, like you guys can see there. And then last but not least, in the run side of things, we cover all kinds of environment, Kubernetes, Docker, OpenShift, Rancher, whatnot, and also various cloud environments like you guys are seeing. So typically, Aqua is in a Kubernetes environment. We run as a daemon set as an enforcer. In a container as a service type of environment, we can run as a micro enforcer, and in a function as a service, we run as a nano enforcer. And all the capabilities of Aqua, including RBAC, secrets, runtime protection, firewall, and compliance, we provide that entire ecosystem. Also, all that third-party integration with various vendors, whether it's LDAP, AD, secret vaults provided like HashiCorp or CyberArk, Collaboration Suite, like PagerDuty, Slack, and whatnot. Also, SIEM and analytic tools, whether it's Splunk and Elastic and whatnot. So we have fantastic third-party integration as well. Okay. So integration into CodeFresh. We'll go into a lot more details in the demo, but this is just a screen to show you how we integrate with CodeFresh. We'll be showing you the demo, so we'll go into that detail. From Aqua image scanning perspective, some of the key features, right? What does Aqua do from image scanning, and how does it relate specifically to CodeFresh? The CD scanning is based on multiple sources from all these different proprietary research that we do, vendor advisories, NVD databases that we integrate. We scan for hard-coded secrets in images, private keys, certificates, and whatnot. Scan for malware. We support all kinds of Docker registries, and also all your best practice configuration that you guys have set up in the form of a JSON file. We check that as well. We have a lot of native plugins for CI/CD tooling, including CodeFresh, Jenkins, and several other tools. Okay. Aqua runtime, which is all towards the end of the, in the build, ship, and run phase. Aqua does a fantastic job, not only capturing the vulnerabilities right up front in the CI/CD process, but also we focus pretty heavily on the runtime as well. Okay, so we check your build artifact for any configurations that has been detected, that has been changed or whatever. And depending on that, Aqua can block those things as well. So very cool runtime protection from Aqua. We also offer Docker and Kubernetes CIS benchmarks. This is like over 200 plus tests that is run on a constant basis. And when you go into the Aqua dashboard, this can be easily brought forth as well. So this is all in the Aqua CSP platform, the container security platform. Some of our open source tooling that is shown here are the KubeBench, which just provides the CIS benchmark, and also KubeHunter, which gives you the pen testing capability for your Kubernetes deployment. And again, these two products are already rolled into Aqua's platform, and that way, you get the full benefit of the open source security tools as well. But you guys can go to github.com/aquasecurity and download these products and play with them, as well. So, kind of in summary, containers present an opportunity for better security, right? And I'm not going to read through this whole slew of list here, but you guys can see why this is important. When you're running containers, you want to shift left and prevent all the anomalies right up front in the CI/CD process with a tool like CodeFresh and Aqua. So you want to do things, stop images, which has got high CVE scores and things like that, and also prevent other suspicious process privilege escalations and whatnot. So would highly encourage you guys to try Aqua and secure cloud native workloads today. We are on Cloud Marketplace and almost all the major vendors there. You can try our open source products like KubeHunter, KubeBench. We also are a free product, which is Tahoe Microscanner as well. So have a plan, involve your teams, and use the tools from Aqua. And also from CodeFresh, go to codefresh.io and open up a free account there. Dan, you want to say a few things before we jump into the demo, or should we open up for some questions?
Yeah, I think that the demo is going to really do a good job of showing how this stuff works. But like, let's look at it from like an engineer's perspective. If I'm building out a new feature, then maybe I'm adding in a library, and I don't know that that library has a vulnerability in it. But as soon as I make my commit, this should fire off. Ideally, you actually run tests either on every commit or at least certainly on a pull request when they feel like it's ready to go. And so if they've introduced a library that happens to have a vulnerability in it, they get that information right away, and they can Aqua actually provides information about the mitigation that should be done, whether that's upgrading to a different version or if there's some additional mitigation that's needed. All that information is right there, and it's linked to the build in CodeFresh. So we're going to see that. But that workflow, the reason that's important is because at the end of the day, there's really two different values we're trying to balance here. We want the developers to be as productive as possible, but we also want the applications to be secure. And those two values tend to be, at least traditionally, in conflict. But with a process and a system like the one that we're showing you today, those things aren't in conflict. Instead, the process builds in the security review in an automatic way. So if I'm a developer, I'm working on changes, I get the information that I need back to fix it right away. I don't have to involve anyone else. And from a security team standpoint, you're really thinking, what policy should I be enforcing, rather than how do I make sure that every developer knows how to fix everything, because that's just going to be built into the process. So you're really just thinking about policy and tracking changes and those kinds of things, rather than chasing down every little commit and trying to have some sort of review process on every single module that you import to do a task. That's what I would say, and then I think we should just get into the demo and show how this stuff is working, so people can visualize it a little bit better.
Okay, perfect. This sounds good. Let's get started with the demo.
Hey Raj, we do have a couple of questions that maybe we should get answered here before we jump into the demo real quick. One of the questions from Nadeem is CodeFresh or Aqua going to scan my code/image?
Yeah.
So in this case, when the CodeFresh, so you're going to make a change, that's going to fire off a webhook to CodeFresh, which is going to automatically build the image, and then CodeFresh is going to ping Aqua and say, hey, please scan this image that I just built. This is going to pull the image into Aqua, and then Aqua is going to do its scan, and then it's going to report back all the information back to CodeFresh, along with enforcing any policy, such as like failing the build if it passes a certain threshold.
And then another question, thank you for that, Dan. Another question here, do you think these vulnerabilities still exist if I choose simply an OS Linux container like Ubuntu?
The answer to that's like 100%. like for sure. So not only, using official distros like that, definitely a good idea. But in terms of eliminating vulnerabilities, you have to keep those things very up to date. And it's not just the OS container you're using, it's actually the libraries you're using in your software. So if I'm using, Ruby and I bring in a gem, maybe that gem isn't safe, or maybe if I'm an NPM module, maybe that thing isn't safe. In fact, using something like Ubuntu is actually not best practice. What you want to do is eliminate as much attack surface as possible. So you really want to have essentially either a scratch image or an Alpine image that you're pulling just the components that you need for your application to run into the container. I don't know of anybody that's using like Ubuntu for a production image, because I don't know why you would do that. Like, why do you need, SSH installed? Do you need all of the different packages that Ubuntu ships with? Is there a reason for that? Because if your application needs it to run, then by all means, but that should be very specifically allocated. That shouldn't be just a general, well, I know it works on Ubuntu, and I assume there are a bunch of dependencies. You want to build your image to be as Spartan as possible. It should only have the bare minimum it needs to run your application. Raj, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, no, you're right on, Dan. And moreover, the size of the images kind of goes a lot bigger with an image like Ubuntu or CentOS, which has got a lot of vulnerabilities, like you mentioned, right? So you have to be very careful in what your base image is. So an image like Alpine would be a perfect start. And in fact, a lot of our Aqua containers that we run as a daemon set in Kubernetes is precisely just that. It's based off of Alpine image, and it's very small, and you kind of build your layers from that.
Yeah, sometimes I will see, like people will have Java containers that have Gradle installed, and that means that they did it wrong. That like you shouldn't have. Why would you allow? Like, first of all, Gradle doesn't need to be there for your jar files to run. And that just means that now you have to worry about whatever vulnerabilities might be inside of Gradle, whereas that should only be in your build process. And with containers, you can solve this with multi-stage Docker files. We have a whole guide on that on the CodeFresh blog. If you search multi-stage Docker CodeFresh, you can find a guide on how to use that. But this is another reason that Go has become a lot more popular, because Go creates these binaries that they're the only thing that are needed to run that application. So you can literally just basically take a scratch image and drop that binary into it and call it a day. And this means that you have incredibly small images, which of course that means they start up faster, they're easier to work with, all those kinds of things. But also from an attack surface perspective, there's hardly any attack surface.
Correct. Yeah.
Great question.
Perfect.
Awesome. Thank you both for those answers. Fantastic. If you'd like to move into the demonstration, I think we might have taken care of the questions so far. Any more questions that you guys want to send in for all the attendees that are sending in questions? Remember to put them into the panel. If you miss your questions today, we will be recording this session as well, and you can ask questions later or directly. Thanks, everyone.
Right. Thanks, David. All right, so let's jump into the demo here. So I'm logged into my CodeFresh account here, and we're going to look at this particular project. It's called Aqua CodeFresh. So let me go ahead and click on this. So I'm going to have Dan walk through this code here because this is very CodeFresh centric, and we have the Aqua stuff that is added here. So I'll let Dan explain what's going on. Dan?
Sure. So this is a three-stage pipeline. You can see at the top we've identified 3 stages: checkout, build, and scan. There's a clone step where we're pulling in the code. This is actually not using the default get checkout step. I'm not actually sure why we did that, but you can actually find a get clone step just on codefresh.io. There's a bunch of example pipelines sitting on the homepage. You can see the get clone step. Then it's doing a Docker build, and you can see this is actually a type step. So it's type build, and we put it stage build, which just puts it into the build stage. So it's organized visually for us. We give it a name, and then the working directory is a variable based on where that get clone happened. In this case, if we, I guess we actually should have probably used the default get clone step, because it automatically sets the default working directory to be wherever that code was checked out. Now the information between each of these steps, this is kind of a unique thing about CodeFresh. It's a bit of a sidebar, but every step here is actually executing in its own container. And to make it easy for us to get information between these containers, there's a shared volume that's automatically mounted, which this build step is using. It's actually referencing the shared volume to get at the code that was just cloned. That shared volume is also persistent. That means every time we run this build, it's going to pull back that code and everything that's happened on that shared volume. So all that caching is done automatically. And then lastly, after we've done that build step, then you notice there's actually not an additional registry push step, because when you build an image in CodeFresh, it's automatically saved in the CodeFresh registry. Now, of course, we could push it out to Docker Hub or to any other Docker provider. And then lastly, we have the Aqua security scan step. And this is actually a default plugin for CodeFresh. It's just an image, as you can see, that is designed and knows how to do a security scan. And if you go, Raj, if you don't mind going to steps.codefresh.io, you can see there's a whole library of these steps that you can grab and use. So we basically just took the Aqua step from this steps library and dropped it in. So there's a whole bunch of these you can use. Yep, there's the Aqua one. This is actually a slightly newer version than the one we're using today. But basically, it's just takes some arguments out. That's all you need to do. So that's what's happening with this. Now, this Aqua step, this image that's running is going to do a couple of things. It's going to tell Aqua, go scan the image that I just built. And then it's going to consume back the scan information and whether or not Aqua, whether or not this scan meets the Aqua policy, security policy. And if it doesn't meet policy, then it will fail this build. And if it does meet the policy, then it will succeed. And then it will annotate all this information back into CodeFresh.
Yep, perfect, sounds good. So what we're going to do here is we are going to run this pipeline right now. But before we do that, I want to kind of go to the Aqua security dashboard and kind of give you guys a quick one-on-one on what's going on. So when you log into the Aqua dashboard, you'll see all the alerts that are coming in, the number of containers that are running. In my case, I have a simple two-node cluster here, two-node Kubernetes cluster, number of images that have been scanned, total number of vulnerabilities, right? All the scanned images will be coming into Aqua is in this area, but the most important step here is about the policy. So let's look at the assurance policy. And here, if I click on the default policy, so you will see here, this is the default policy that CodeFresh is going to compare against. So in this case, I have only two simple policies that I have selected, the CV blacklist and then malware. So there's nothing else is in here. So let me go ahead and run this, and this should run successfully fine because we are not capturing anything like if it finds a vulnerability, it's going to say, hey, I'm going to find a vulnerability, but Aqua doesn't have that step included in its policy configuration. So this will take a couple of seconds here to run through the checkout process, the build and scan. Again, this is the three phases that you guys saw in that pipeline process that Dan was just explaining. So Dan, while this is running, I know sometimes it takes a little bit of time depending on my internet connection, but anything else you want to add here?
Yeah, so what's actually happening on the back end here is this is spinning up new pods on a Kubernetes cluster to execute this pipeline, and it's bringing in and attaching that shared volume. And so this actually means that we get really, really fast build times. So typically when you switch from traditional CI tools to CodeFresh, you usually see often a 70% increase in the speed. So it does seem to be running a little bit slow today. There was an issue this morning with Docker Hub not providing images, but I don't know if that's I thought that was resolved. but that was a Docker Hub issue specifically. So this should kick off and run. Now this scan step, and maybe we could actually just show a build that we did earlier if you'd like. Well, this one's running.
Yeah, we could. Yeah, this is taking this took a little bit. Oh, there it goes. It took a little bit of time today morning as well, Dan, but then it completed this checkout and build process really quick, and see it's already in the Aqua scan step right now. So
yeah, why don't you click, if you click on that, you can see that it's been. You can see the output from that step. Looks like scans happened, doesn't show any errors, and now it's going to add annotations onto that image. So here, if we click on images on the left-hand side of the screen, and we click on the image that we just built, I think it's that top one. Oh, so this one actually shows all of this annotation information. There's a link to the Aqua dashboard. It shows that total CV counts. Looks like we had a few high CVs actually. So we just need to add a policy to start blocking those, right?
Perfect. Yeah. So now what we do is, so even though we passed, even though it had a high CVE counts and some medium CVE counts, we let it pass because our policy was kind of wide open right here. So when you go into Aqua, and when you want to set any of these image assurance policy controls, it's very straightforward. You click on this plus icon right here, and this adds the vulnerability severity. And the same case, it applies for all the other things. If you want to add things like super user, custom compliance checks, sensitive data, all kinds of things you can add. You can just click on the plus arrow and add. To keep things simple for this demo, all we are doing right here is we are adding vulnerability severity. So it checks for any images that has got high vulnerability severity. If it finds it, it's going to mark that as non-compliant, and also it'll fail that. So right now, if you look in the image, okay, and if I go to my private image right there, okay, and of course I applied this rule. That's why it shows that vulnerability severity. It marked it already as non-compliant. But let's run it through code fresh right here. Go through this project again, and we'll run through this, and it should fail this time. Hopefully it runs a little faster now because of the, but yeah, this will go through this whole checkout, build, and scan process, and then it should fail in the the scan process. Okay. So hopefully you guys are seeing the entire ecosystem as it kind of goes through the checkout, build, and the scan process, where we are able to make the modification in Aqua, right? We made this modification from the policy standpoint on the default policy, right? We just simply added this vulnerability severity, and which says, hey, if it's got high vulnerability severity, just fail that, right? So now, sure enough, we failed that because it found those vulnerabilities. It says it's disallowed. Reason is max severity and things like that. Okay, so and again, if you go to the images like Dan was showing earlier, we can see that the security scan step failed right here. Okay, and the disallowed reason was max severity. Okay. You can also click in here and go through that, and it'll show you the same process. Okay. So when you come up here to the images section, and you can see here, this image is marked non-compliant, and it also found 17 vulnerabilities here, and you can click through each and every one of your CVEs right here, and you can see that the scores, the NVD score and the Aqua scores are also shown here. Okay. All right, so that pretty much kind of shows the demo end to end, how CodeFresh from the CI/CD build platform for Kubernetes integrates with Aqua, and we kind of shift left and address all your security concerns right up front in your build process. So this way you can deploy secure cloud native apps very quickly and fast in your environment. Anything else you want to add, Dan, here?
Well, just thinking about this from a workflow perspective, if I'm making changes, I'm getting feedback automatically from this build process. It's probably sending me a Slack notification saying, hey, this workflow failed because security policy wasn't met. And I'm in the mode of making these changes, so I can very easily come and deal with the security vulnerability right now. Whereas if, you know, what I see in a lot of traditional organizations is I make my build changes, I push everything, I do my pull request, it goes to staging, and then all of a sudden the security team says, oh, there's issues with that. And now I've involved several people. We have to track down who added the thing and figure out who's going to fix it. From a process perspective, this introduces so much overhead and time and cost that it's really the reason that a lot of organizations haven't had a good security practice. And if you follow something like this, dealing with vulnerabilities is not very hard. At least you can eliminate the known ones. And often what happens too is that as you go along, you actually find vulnerabilities in stuff that you've been using, right? Because vulnerabilities are usually found in stuff that's been existing for a while. And so by building this into the process, you just address it right away. I would also suggest that if you're using, if you have some software that's not being updated frequently, and by frequently I mean like once a week, you can introduce an automated check, an automated process to try to do some remediation. Now, this isn't a demo that we're going to do today, but if Aqua finds, if vulnerabilities are found in images that you already have in production, Aqua will actually identify those. And I believe there's that feature, Raj, that will automatically try to take some mitigation, correct?
Correct, yeah.
How does that work again exactly? I have an image running in my cluster and I've got an Aqua Enforcer running, and it will automatically sort of patch that vulnerability in some sense.
Yeah, so we have this new feature called vShield, Dan. So what that does is if we identify a new vulnerability that is running on a container which is actually running in production, let's say, it got to that stage, you can apply this vShield, which is kind of like a virtual patch mechanism. So it kind of gives you an air cover for your containers. So even though there is a vulnerability, it will kind of prevent the attacks on those vulnerabilities for any running containers. So it's a great new feature for Aqua. We have a webinar about it and also a lot of blog posting around that as well. So great new features in our 4.2 version of Aqua. So definitely, if somebody wants to explore more, I would love to show you guys a demo of that as well.
Yeah, good. And the other thing I was going to mention is that you can actually set up a webhook when vulnerabilities are discovered to trigger CodeFresh pipelines to try to automatically rebuild an image, which is fairly, that's a great way to introduce fixes immediately, because then instead of hearing that there's a CVE and saying, oh, are we covered for that? You're getting an automated process that's telling you we aren't covered for that. We just tried to rebuild the image. Now it doesn't meet security policy. It throws a failed message into Slack, and we can deal with it immediately. And the really sad thing about most vulnerabilities is that they're unpatched software where the vulnerability has been known for a long time. And it's very frustrating. I think for me as somebody, as an engineer who's had my information stolen so many times because different companies didn't have their software secure, is I just think, well, this vulnerability has been around for 9 months and you didn't bother to patch? Like, come on, this is my information, protect it. So I expect a lot better out of people, but this is the kind of process what we showed today, this example pipeline. And by the way, it takes you maybe 10 minutes to implement this, what we showed you today. You got to spin up Aqua, so that takes a minute. But then in terms of setting up your pipeline to actually consume Aqua, it's basically copying and pasting that step from our steps library, adding in a couple variables. So this is not a costly process. This is not difficult. It's not difficult to add on to existing pipelines. So I strongly encourage you to do it. With CodeFresh, you don't even need a paid CodeFresh account to do this. You can just use a free CodeFresh account. So you just go to codefresh.io, create an account, create a pipeline, try out the Aqua integration, and you can see how quickly this works.
Perfect. All right, Dan, thank you so much. Audience, thank you all so much. And at this time, we'll open up for questions. So David, do you want to take it over?
Thanks, Raj. I noticed one question that maybe was explained while we were doing the demonstration, but just to shoot it out to you guys, maybe you want to give a real quick overview. We have Pankaj asking, how do we make sure the Alpine image we're using is secure? So like I said, Raj, you probably went over this in the demonstration, but you want to give a quick overview of what you showed there?
Yeah, so the Alpine by nature itself is a fairly secure image, and actually you can bring it into the Aqua dashboard and scan it as a first step, I guess, if you want to do that. And it's very simple to do that. And let me do a quick show of that. So if you go into the Aqua Security Container platform here, you click on Images, and you can just click on just Add Image. And let's say if you want to search Alpine, and you can click on Search, and there is Alpine right there. Okay, and you can say Add the latest, and you can add it to the scan queue. And what this does is Aqua wets the image and brings it into the Aqua platform. We'll scan for all the vulnerabilities or any kind of issues that might be associated with that image. And if there is anything, we will alert the users accordingly. And as you can see here, I have an Alpine image already. This is maybe a slightly older one, the 3.7. It doesn't have any vulnerability at all. Pretty much there is one medium vulnerability, which is quite okay in most of the cases. But you can see this image is passed in flying colors here. Okay? So that's that.
Awesome. Fantastic. Well, it looks like that was the last question for now. Thanks again, Dan and Raj, for a great presentation on securing cloud-native applications in a development pipeline. And thanks to everyone who attended the webinar today. If you'd like to learn more about this topic, check out our blog about Docker image scanning in your CodeFresh pipeline with Aqua. Or check out our websites at aquasec.com and codefresh.io. Have a great week, everybody. See you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.